Absolutely.
All right, on this episode of Bowks Talking Bouts, very excited to be speaking with an individual who I've wanted on the show for quite a while now, in my estimation, one of the most influential figures in MMA over several years now. I'm speaking with the CEO slash president of Invicta FC, and great to have Shannon Knapp on Bowks Talking Bouts to cover a few subjects today. How are you doing there, Shannon?
Doing great. And thanks, Dylan, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
And just such a cool time for the promotion with Invicta FC 61 going down in April on the 4th specifically, and just April marking 13 years of Invicta FC. Like, what do you, I guess, think and feel when you hear something like that? Because that's quite the landmark achievement in many regards.
Really it is, to be honest. I think sometimes I just continue, you just keep moving forward and kind of with your head down and just working to make things successful. So I think sometimes you forget to just stop and think about how many years you've been doing it and where you're at, in that journey. So, yeah, it's exciting. I think Invicta's healthier than it's ever been. We're thriving and just really excited for 2025. We've got some great things coming along that, we'll be happy to announce as we get there. And yeah, it's going to be a good year for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because there was rumblings at one point about like, what's happening with Invicta. I always, I guess, thought there was like some sort of restructuring or something in the works is maybe the better way to phrase it. Like, was that kind of a difficult sort of time in a particular regard because it seemed like a lot of negotiating for broadcast rights deals were going on, and that can obviously take quite a while as you're well aware. So, can you explain that certain period? Like, was it just a certain thing where you're quietly kind of smiling to yourself? It's like, no, we've got quite a bit in the works actually.
Everybody's always going to assume something. And, when we're not, volunteering information, that gives I don't mind a lot of time to kind of try to think up scenarios of things that could be happening. But the truth is though things do take time. And when you're making, doing negotiating for a partnership, and sometimes it takes a little longer than expected. But yeah, privately, of course, I was aware of what's happening, knowing that the new partnership and the alignment with CBS Sports was going to be a huge step forward for Invicta and for the athletes, of course, for that exposure and, the opportunity for new audiences that, was kind of still well worth the wait. And of course, you don't always want to kind of take that time off, but sometimes you have to make that next big step.
And such a historically significant network in the MMA space, as you well know. Like, how much is it like, I guess, like a measure of esteem or a feather in the cap, whatever language you want to use, to have Invicta FC broadcast on CBC Sports Network, where there's so much, I guess, historical connectivity in the sport to that network?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think, CBS Sports have been a great partner. And, they're very renowned in sports. So I think this was a huge step for us and one that, certainly am proud of, I guess would be the best way to say it. Anytime we are able to, climb the mountain, break the barrier, get into places that we haven't been before, it's a proud moment.
Yeah, for sure. Just such an incredible moment in many regards, for sure. And just so cool to see for Invicta. Just like I was speaking to how tenured it is as a promotion, I feel like you can look at so many just names within the landscape of the sport, and pretty much, everyone has fought under that banner. Like, I was even kind of, combing back through the archives, as it were, and just, seeing something like with Invicta FC2, for instance, just even that isolated event alone, names like Amanda Nunes, Carla Esparza, Raquel Pennington, just so many future UFC champions, just even on that isolated card.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Invicta has been and still is very important to the health of, the sport for women competing. And yeah, it's another very proud moment to have been part of those athletes' journey in this space. I mean, it's amazing to see, the stars of today and yesterday, I guess, that have come through Invicta. And yeah, it's pretty incredible when you stop and think about how many amazing athletes have been through, Invicta. I started to say the doors, but the cage doors, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's really incredible to think about how many athletes and just where their careers are today. So yeah, it's cool to be part of that journey.
Yeah, and it just seems like such a talent scout oriented kind of promotion. Like just always that finger is on the pulse for just like that next crop of talent. And you could even look at some of the recent events through a certain lens where it's like, who knows, X amount of years from now, it's like you could have an entirely new crop of, prolific athletes and stuff like that. So just always an exciting thing to follow. But I was curious to get your thoughts on Amanda Nunes, just being that, like I said, she had fought under your banner. It seems like there's some rumblings that perhaps she would entertain coming back to the sport. Do you ultimately foresee Amanda Nunes fighting at least once more in mixed martial arts?
I think it could happen. Will it happen? Of course, I don't know. But I had the pleasure of, working with Amanda at Strikeforce as well. So, I've known her for a long time. She's a fierce competitor. I haven't talked to her in a while, so I don't know how, retirement is sitting, with her, if she's enjoying it or, as they say, the itch that needs to be scratched kind of thing. But she's very, very talented. Always has been. I can remember the first time I saw her fight, against Julia Budd in Strikeforce is where, I really first really got to see that side of her talent. And just knowing that I always say that she changed Julia Budd's career in that regard. Julia was always a stand-up athlete. And then after Amanda, she kind of changed and veered in a different direction, more of the wrestling side, as you watch how she progressed over the years. But Amanda's very talented. Do I think she could still, maybe that's the better question. Do I think she could still compete and be incredibly competitive? Absolutely. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, because I feel like the theory that some people have with that whole situation is that perhaps she would, wait things out. And I mean, this isn't a formally booked fight, but it seems like the writing's kind of on the wall with Kayla Harrison, another Invicta FC alum, taking on Juliana Pena for that title. So just always interesting to, I guess, speculate and see how things shake out, I suppose.
I like that matchup, honestly. Kayla and Julia, I think it's going to be very interesting. So I like it. I like a competitive fight like that that's matched well. And, there, we know Julia, there's going to be some smack talk on that fight. So it's always makes it even more exciting, I think.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And you were mentioning Strikeforce and your time there. That kind of got me thinking of the recent Dark Side of the Cage episode that chronicled Nick Diaz. And it was cool to see you as part of that, series and everything like that. What was the, I guess, overall experience like being on that shoot and taking part in the Dark Side of the Cage process and everything?
I enjoyed it as long as, my big deal is always if I'm going to be part of something, I want it to be something that's positive, especially when it comes to the athletes. I'm a huge advocate for the athletes, as I always have been. And um, yeah, I think they deserve to have their story told, whatever that story is. But I was just, the, I haven't seen that episode yet. So I just, I'm hesitant to say, but I hope they portrayed it in a very positive way.
Yeah, and that's partly why I brought it up. Like, I got the sense that it was a positive depiction and great insights that you added to the piece overall. But that was, I guess, the follow-up question. If you had, I guess, seen the overall end product and everything, but you just indicated that you haven't.
Yeah, and I especially hadn't seen the Nick Diaz one yet. So I was just hoping that that was a positive portrayal as well. Athletes put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears go into what they do. And I think it's always important that we always focus on their contributions and how they make the sport better. It's not us as promoters, it's the actual athletes that make the difference.
Yeah, is that something you've felt like you've always had in the sport? Because it seems like that's been, I guess, the surrounding perception of you, just how like fighter focused you are and just how much you've given to the sport across really multiple promotions. Like you mentioned your time with Strikeforce and just, IFL, Invicta FC, obviously, just some incredible stuff. Like, have you always been very like fighter forward and fighter centric? Like, was that what initially even drew you to the sport? I'm curious about that.
The only reason, I've always been a fan of combat sports, but truly the only reason I stepped into the space was because I thought I could make a difference. That old saying, you can sit on the couch and you can complain about what's happening, or you can get up and do something about it. And it was literally that mindset that brought me into the sport was, I've been doing this for a long time. So that's back when, athletes weren't getting paid right. There was a lot of issues in the sport, just trying to legitimize it. And it was like, you can sit on the couch all day and complain, or you can get up and try to make a difference. You may be only one person, but it only takes one to initiate a change. And that's really what brought me in. And to be honest with you, that's what's kept me in the space. Trust me, there are a lot of easier things that, one could probably do. But this is just passion. It's pure passion on my side. I mean, I love what I love the sport. That's the bottom line is I love the sport and I respect and appreciate, what the athletes bring to the sport. Without them, there is nothing. So I always think it's important that they deserve to have people on their side and lobby for, giving them that place to compete, a safe environment, and to succeed at what they do.
Yeah, and that definitely comes across. I feel like there's that, I guess, like historical appreciation too, in a lot of regards. Like, just in the sense, I think it's so cool that Jennifer Maya had secured a win on Invicta FC's fifth event and is now the present day bantamweight champion. And just, what you do with like Megan Anderson, a former prolific Invicta FC fighter and former UFC title challenger, being like so involved in the broadcasting. So it's just cool to see for people who've like followed along with the sport and then specifically Invicta as well.
Yeah, and they choose to be here. That's the big deal for me is that given the choice, because they do have opportunities, in other places that they could be, but the fact that they choose to be here, I think says it all. I think, that's, what I strive to, for Invicta to be a place that athletes want to be. And yeah, it's very exciting, when they do want to be here and that we can work together to make that difference, for Invicta as well.
And you talk about the tenure in the sport and how much passion there has been for it. Like, do you have like an early, like formative moment that really like drew you into the sport where you felt like, the proverbial hooks were sank in and everything like that? Like, was there like a moment that really just immediately drew you to the sport? Was it maybe more of like a gradual kind of thing as opposed to like a defined specific epiphany moment, if that distinction makes sense?
Yeah, I don't know if there's just one. Well, I guess there is kind of. I've always, like I said before, I've always loved combat sports. I can remember being a little girl laying at bed at night and thinking if I hit him like this, he's going to do that. And then if I do this, he'll do that. Creating fight sequences in my mind. When I got older, I tried to get my mom to send me to the ninja camps in the back of Soldier of Fortune magazine. I always thought that was super cool. Of course, in my mind at that time, it was more about, walking up trees, disappearing, it wasn't realistic, but I've just always loved it. And I think for me, watching Hoist Gracie trying to figure out what is this guy doing, and I think, one of the first UFCs, like he's just laying there, what is happening? And that sparking my interest, just make, my curious mind to understand it. Then watching probably fights like the Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin when you're like, I can make a difference. You know that you can make a difference, and it just keep pushing you forward to want to do something. When you see that kind of passion and display of all heart and that that kind of thing, that it certainly draws you in to want to be part of those type of movements and really kind of break down the doors or the barriers as you walk through those to make it more acceptable. Of course, that was the male side, but that's a moment that, I thought to myself, they really deserve to be known and accepted as a mainstream sport. Just watching some of those moments.
I guess like that kind of leads me to a question that I find interesting. Like you talk about how influential Bonner and Griffin was on the, I guess like male side of things for, lack of a better way to phrase it. Like in terms of like maybe like a defined moment in a similar sense with women's MMA, like what would you, I guess, bestow that similar kind of moniker to? I guess like my thought kind of goes towards fights like say, Gina Carano versus Chris Cyborg,
That's
Cyborg
the
being
one I was
another.
going to talk about. I was there. Yeah. So that is actually the very one I would talk about that changed because there has to be a point in my career where the perception, changes about females competing. I'm old school. I've been doing this a really long time. So when, I kind of came up on the male side of the sport, and I can remember promoters coming to me or the people I'm working for at the time and wanting to do a female bout, but they weren't asking me to find the best of the best, like they would do when on the male side. They would want me to find the best of the best in each weight division. But when they approached me talking about female athletes, it wasn't about find us the best of the best. It was more about the way the athlete looks. And I can remember, saying to a couple of them, it's like, no, you're not taking a spot away from my male athletes. They've worked hard, and just that whole pitch about this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to allow it. But when I did work at Strikeforce and I had the opportunity to watch athletes like Chris Cyborg, Gina Carano, those Marloes Kunin, those type of athletes, even Misha Tate, she's a little bit younger in that group, but it really opened my eyes to the level of talent, the skill set, how strong and how tough these women were, and that they were doing everything that the male side of the sport was doing. It just changed my mind. It empowered me with a wisdom and a knowledge that I certainly didn't have before. I wasn't exposed to the female side of the sport. And when I was being approached, it was always about something other than how talented they were. So yeah, I think that's what did it. That's what changed my mind. It's actually what even propelled me into, Invicta in the first place. So, building Invicta was them giving me the tools. I thought if they can change my mind, so old school like I am, then they've given me the tools to go out and change other people's mind. And that's really how this all came about is there was a need. Nobody wanted to do this. Nobody wanted to roll up their sleeves and fight the good fight is what I call it. So dun dun dun, dun here I am. And I forged my way in and yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, just so incredible. I feel like there's so many things I can talk to you about while I have you, while also being mindful of your time. But just one of the things I wanted to touch on while I have you, because you were obviously, you know, well involved with IFL back in the day,
Yeah.
director of fighter relations and very well known for the team sport concept. Like Global Fight League is rolling out a similar thing. I mean, it seems like there's maybe some question marks about when the specific events will be, etc. But I guess just what are your thoughts on, what GFL is endeavoring to do, considering the, I guess, parallel with the team sport format and all?
To be honest with you, I haven't really took, time to take a look at what the structure is, but I can say this, from experience, just in, my own promotion, to IFL, to every promotion, it's not an easy task. And when you're trying to do something new, I think sometimes people underestimate the financial commitments that it takes to do these kind of things. So, of course, I always wish everyone well. And if it's something that's better for the athletes, I'm all about it. My concerns, always when I see a startup and things like that is sometimes the promises that get made. I'm always concerned, you just want the best for the athletes. The promotion doesn't really matter. It's what they're going to deliver and what promises have been made. That's always the thing I look at. But yeah, I just haven't seen the structure, couldn't tell you much about it at all, to be honest, other than I know they're getting ready to do events. Haven't heard anything other than April, but I also know time's ticking. So that's about it.
Yeah, there's such a fine balance in combat sports, I suppose, because you obviously want to like, put what you're promoting on like a certain pedestal or highlight it in a certain way, but it's that confluence of it being like grounded in reality, but like kind of hyperbolic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, it takes a lot of money to do it right. It does, from the production, athlete purses, and it's great that you always want to give back because that's always what I want to do. But I think that, there's only certain places that you can make money in the sport, and you certainly can't overextend yourself. So that's it. I mean, that's the thing is I always look at is this, just the foundation to see if I think that it would be successful or not. All I can think about is money. When you start at it, it takes a lot of money. They have
Yeah.
talent over there. So, they've signed a lot of talent, but that type of talent costs you money. So it always goes back to that starting point. But I wish them well, of course.
Yeah, fair. I mean, you do kind of wonder where the capital is coming from in a sense, but also, like you said, wishing all the best for the fighters'
Yeah, of
sake and
course.
everything. I guess one of
Yeah,
the
at
things
the
I,
end,
yeah.
oh,
Oh, sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was just going to say at the end of the day, I hope that they're successful because that's great for the athletes, for sure.
Absolutely. And I kind of wanted to pull back to something you mentioned earlier in our conversation. Perhaps it's something that might get mentioned in like the body of an Invicta FC broadcast per se, but you were kind of using the terminology of, big things coming up. Like, are there certain like big announcements that are, I guess, ready to be announced at this juncture? Or are there still some things in the works? Or, like I said, maybe done on like an Invicta broadcast within the progression of the show? I guess I'm just curious about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we are working on some things that, yeah, I certainly can't talk about them because they're not finalized, but hoping, just some new things that we're working on in terms of partnerships. So, yeah, that's it. But I'll be happy to share when it comes time to be able to share those things. But yeah, we just have some things in the works that I think fans will be excited about.
Yeah, I mean, Invicta definitely has that track record that speaks to that, just like big, exciting announcements and stuff like that. I guess something that I'd be curious to also get your thoughts on because it seemed like there was some discourse around last December, just a couple months ago here, where there was some talk about, UFC maybe having a certain interest level in establishing an atomweight division. Drake Riggs had asked Dana White about Saika Izawa, the Ryzen champion, potentially coming in, and obviously Invicta has historically done so much, great stuff for standout atomweight athletes. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that is like the next division the UFC might be interested in bringing into the fold because they have such a deep talent pool for sure?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, yeah, I didn't know where you were going with that when you said the shakeup. It's like, wow. I was trying to think back in December what happened. I don't know. I think right now they're really focused on the divisions they have. I think there are some holes in some of the areas, in those divisions. Um, yeah, I honestly don't know. I can't answer that, to be honest. If that is a division they're interested in or not. I haven't spoke to them about it, certainly. So,
Yeah, no, fair enough. I guess something I also wanted to touch on because Strikeforce has kind of been mentioned a couple times. I'd be so curious to, get some anecdotal experiences from you working for that promotion because that was such an important part of my MMA viewership back in the
ah,
day and just yeah, so great. So are there any like standout anecdotes that pop up when you think of your tenure with Strikeforce?
wow. There were so many great moments, working with Strikeforce and the mix of athletes that were there. I was very instrumental in the heavyweight Grand Prix tournament, all that kind of stuff. There are just so many stories too. Just like you were talking about Gina and Chris Cyborg, I will never forget that, Showtime was very, you know, oh, I don't want to say all for Gina, but they certainly were kind of, catering to that side. I'll never forget being in the Showtime office, and I'm in the back, of course, because I always watch my athletes, and I'm the one that wishes them well as they go out. I'm the one that they see when they come back. I'll never forget, being in the office and listening to them talk about Gina and everybody betting on that side. I walked into Gina's room, where she's at with all the, their corners and everything. And there's Gina on the floor. She's like a Pilates stretches and, like, and you see Randy Couture and her team, Jay Huron, all these guys. And then I walk out and I walk over to Chris Cyborg's room. And she is literally beating the heck out of Evangelisa at the time. I'll never forget just standing there like, looking at her in such awe. And I walked back into that office and I was like, I don't think you guys know what's about ready to happen. I mean, she just, they were just such different polar opposites of what was going on in those rooms. And I had seen Chris fight when she was in Elite XC, and it was really my first time of really kind of having the opportunity to be around and kind of see her in that kind of atmosphere. And it was pretty incredible. And just that being the first time, on, I think it was CBS, or what was it, CBS Sports, or not CBS Sports, but that card. Was that the first one on CBS or was that a Showtime?
I
I
believe it
can't
was
remember.
CBS if memory recalls, but yeah,
Yeah, it was
a
just
lot
the
of fight cards.
Showtime
Yeah.
crew that was there. Yeah, I was thinking that was CBS, but yeah, it was just an incredible moment. Just, to be backstage and see all of that and be right up against it and kind of have that awareness of what was about ready to happen that nobody else was really expecting. That would be something that kind of sticks out from the time. But there's tons of stories like those.
Well, it must have been such a thrill for you to be able to have or promoted rather Chris Cyborg thereafter, because I remember there was this like kind
Yeah.
of like limbo period where it's like, okay, it's like Strikeforce folded, like what's the I guess the move after this? And I was always like so excited for those particular cards. Like I've always been excited for the Invicta cards, but there was something about that particular era and just your anecdotal experience that you outlined there. That must have been such a thrill for you.
Yeah, it was. You know what it was about really for me is the trust. Is that she trusted me enough to want to be there and she chose, Invicta. That's, kind of when her and the UFC were going back and forth and she had options. Once again, it comes back to that same thing. She had options, but she chose to be here. And, that's just something that when you work hard to build something that you want to be proud of, those are moments that mean a lot.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And I'm sure there's dozens more questions I could ask you, Shannon. You've done so much in the sport, but I also do want to be cognizant of your time, as I kind of had mentioned earlier. So, is there perhaps like a final parting thought you were wanting to add as we're kind of wrapping up here? I do appreciate you making the time today.
No, this has been really fun. I love it when you do you're doing an interview and it's interesting or exciting or taking you back to places that it's been a while since you visited. So no, really for me, I think it always comes down to this is being able to say thank you. Thank you to the people that support us. Thank you to you, the media that takes the time to hear what's going on and ask us questions and to be part of that movement forward. It certainly still takes all of us to really make a difference. And, I just appreciate the media, the fans, and everybody that does support Invicta. And yeah, wow, 13 years, right? It's very exciting. So I didn't do it alone. It took each and everybody. So everyone that, supported us along the way. So just grateful.
Well, it's an awesome sentiment to end things off on, and super excited to check out Invicta FC 61 on April 4th in ATL and just many more Invicta events to come. It seems like there's some big things in the works. And yeah, thanks so much for talking about that today. Hopefully, you have a great rest of your day, Shannon. And thanks so much for coming on Bowks Talking Bouts today to offer such great insights. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.